Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at something I think is really cool. It's the work of Dr. Fabio de Bello,
Mhm.
who uses math, like actual equations, to try to understand love and romantic relationships.
Yeah, it's definitely not the usual way to think about love, right? But Dr. DeBello's approach is getting a lot of attention.
I can see why. Love and math, who would have thought? But that's why I want to do this deep dive. He's not like trying to come up with a formula for finding the perfect partner. It's more about using these ideas from complex systems, almost like how we study weather patterns or ecosystems,
Yeah.
to try to see the patterns that emerge in a relationship over time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about his work. He's looking at all these different factors, emotions, how people communicate, even like stress from work or family, and seeing how they all interact, like a complicated web.
Right. It's not just a straight line from they met to happily ever after. So how does the math actually help with all of this?
Well, he uses these concepts called nonlinear interactions and feedback loops. Think about it this way. You do something nice for your partner, maybe a small gift, or just telling them you appreciate them. That makes them feel good, and they're more likely to do something nice for you in return.
Oh, okay. I see. So it's like one good thing leads to another and it keeps building.
Exactly. It creates this like upward spiral of positive feelings, but of course it can work the other way too.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking that. Like, what happens when those interactions aren't so positive?
Right. So let's say you have a disagreement and there's a misunderstanding. That can lead to hurt feelings. Maybe one person withdraws and then the other feels even more hurt, and it just keeps escalating.
So even something small can snowball into a much bigger problem if you're not careful.
Exactly. And that brings us to this idea of chaotic dynamics. It's this idea that even tiny changes can have a huge impact. You've probably heard of the butterfly effect, right? Like a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can cause a tornado in Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're saying even seemingly insignificant things can have these ripple effects in a relationship.
Yeah, think about it. Maybe you make a careless comment and your partner takes it the wrong way. Suddenly you have this huge argument that seems to come out of nowhere, but it was really that one little comment that set it
Oh,
off.
I think we've all been there. One little thing and everything explodes. Okay, so we've got these feedback loops and these sensitive tipping points. But where do the attractors come in? I've heard about those, but I'm not really sure what they are.
Well, think of it like a landscape with valleys and peaks. The attractors are like these valleys where the relationship tends to settle. It's where things are, relatively stable, even if it's not perfect bliss.
So you're saying that even relationships that have a lot of ups and downs, they still have these patterns, these sort of default settings that they keep returning to.
Right. And he talks about these things called strange attractors, which are like constantly in motion, but within a certain range. So it's not about being static or unchanging, but more about like recognizing the typical patterns that a relationship falls into.
So like a couple that argues a lot but always makes up. That would
Yeah.
be their strange attractor.
Exactly. It's their way of being together, even if it's not always smooth sailing. And it's really helpful for couples to understand this, to see the bigger picture of their own dynamics.
I can see that. It's like once you see the dance you're doing with your partner,
Yeah.
then you can start to think about whether you want to keep dancing that way or learn some new moves.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us to another really important idea, bifurcations. These are like critical points where a small change can suddenly push the relationship in a whole new direction.
So not just the everyday ups and downs, but those moments that can really change things forever.
Right. Think of it like a train changing tracks. Something big happens, maybe a job loss, or someone's unfaithful, or even something positive like getting married or having a child. That event can act like a bifurcation, and suddenly the relationship is on a whole different path.
Wow, that's a really powerful image. It makes you realize how important it is to be aware of those turning points,
Yeah,
to make conscious choices about how to navigate them.
definitely. And understanding bifurcations can help us see when a relationship might be especially vulnerable to those big changes.
Okay, so we've got these systems of interactions, feedback loops, attractors, these moments where things can shift dramatically. But what about those times when it seems like a couple is just totally in sync, like they can read each other's minds? I'm thinking about that synchronization concept that Dr. DeBello talks about.
Ah, yes. Synchronization. Um, Imagine two dancers moving together perfectly. They've found their shared rhythm. It's kind of like that with emotional synchronization in couples. Like when you see two people having a deep conversation and they're mirroring each other's body language or their tone of voice without even realizing it.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's like their emotions are in sync. dancing together.
Exactly. It suggests a really deep connection, a sense of being on the same wavelength. But the question is, how do we go from these abstract mathematical concepts to understanding a real-life relationship? That's where his case study comes in.
Oh, right, Fabio and Federica. I think you mentioned them earlier.
Mhm.
Tell me more about how he uses them to bring all this to life.
Well, that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll see how he takes all these ideas and uses them to create a model of their relationship. And then, get this, he runs these little experiments to see what happens when different things change.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I can't wait to hear more.
Okay, so you remember how we were talking about those equations? Well, Dr. Bello actually uses a bunch of different variables to represent, like, the different aspects of Fabio and Federica's relationship.
Oh, right, like turning their feelings and interactions into, well, I guess math symbols.
Exactly. For example, he uses X for Fabio's level of affection and Y for Federica's, how much they like each other.
So he's like quantifying love. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
What other things does he factor into the equation?
Oh, all sorts of things. Stress, how well they're communicating, even outside things that might be affecting their relationship.
Oh, okay, so like work stress, family stuff,
Mm.
even like what's going on in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's like acknowledging that a relationship isn't just about two people in a bubble.
Right. So how does he actually show how these, like all these different things affect each other?
Well, this is where it gets a bit technical. He uses these things called nonlinear differential equations. Basically, it's a way to map out how changes in one area can have these ripple effects on everything else.
Okay, so like if stress levels go up, that could mess with their communication or how affectionate they are with each other.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect. To give you an idea, the equation for Fabio's affection might look something like this. Ibex plus octaves?
Whoa, okay, that's a lot of Greek letters and symbols. I'm definitely not a mathematician, but I think I get the general idea. So like that equation's showing how Fabio's feelings are being influenced by Federica's feelings, his own affection, how much they're talking, and the stress they're dealing with.
Yeah, you got it. And those Greek letters, those represent how much each factor matters. So it's not just whether something's present or not, but like how strongly it affects Fabio.
Oh, I see. So like if someone's really sensitive to their partner's mood,
Yeah.
that would have a bigger impact than for someone who's like less tuned in, right?
Right. And those weights can change over time too, as the relationship evolves.
So, okay, we've got this model, these equations that represent Fabio and Federica. What does he actually do with it? Like, how does he use this to understand their relationship?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. He starts running these like thought experiments. What if this happens or that happens? For example, he can simulate what happens if their communication starts to break down.
So he's like creating these different scenarios and seeing how their relationship plays out.
Yeah, exactly. And what he finds is that when communication drops, the negative effects of stress get amplified, like way worse.
Oh, that makes sense. Like if you're not talking to each other, it's harder to deal with problems together.
Exactly. Communication is like this buffer against stress. When it's working, it helps protect the relationship. But when it breaks down, that protection is gone.
Wow, it's like communication is the glue that holds everything together when things get tough.
Right. And it's not just about, avoiding arguments or making sure everything's perfect. It's about building that resilience, that ability to bounce back from challenges.
It makes those everyday conversations, like just checking in with each other, seem way more important than just being polite?
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so we've seen what happens when communication goes south, but Dr. DeBello also looks at the flip side. How can connection help couples get through those really tough times?
Oh, yeah, I'm really interested in this. So many couples struggle when they're dealing with like financial problems, health issues, family drama. What does his model say about that?
Well, he simulates this scenario where Fabio and Federica are going through a really stressful period, and what he finds is that spending quality time together can actually like counteract the negative effects of that stress.
So it's not just about taking a break from the stress. It's about actively doing things together that, bring them closer.
Yeah, exactly. When they spend quality time together, it boosts their communication, which we already know is super important, but it also creates these like positive memories and shared experiences.
It's like making those deposits into the relationship bank account, right?
Yeah.
Building up that reserve of love and support that can help them weather the storm.
I love that analogy. It really captures the idea, and remember, we're just scratching the surface here. He explores a lot of different scenarios. But even these two examples, the communication breakdown and the power of quality time, they show us something really important.
Yeah, it's like those patterns, those cause and effect things, they're not always obvious when you're in the middle of it all.
Hmm.
But when you step back and look at it through this mathematical lens, it's like, oh, wow, I get it now.
Exactly. But, I do wonder, how do we reconcile all this predictability with the fact that love often feels so, well, unpredictable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, love is full of surprises, right? Does that mean the math is wrong?
Well, that's a question that takes us into some pretty deep philosophical territory, and that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've seen how math can help us understand the dynamics of love. But now things are getting even more interesting. We're going to dive into the philosophical side of
Huh.
all of this. Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing, honestly, to think that love, this magical thing, could be represented by, equations.
It definitely makes you think. Dr. DeBello's work is making people ask questions about, well, free will. Like, if we can create a mathematical model of love, does that mean it's all, like, predetermined? Do our choices even matter?
Right. It's like, if we know all the variables, can we just calculate the outcome? What happens to the mystery, the excitement of not knowing what's going to happen?
It's easy to think that way, but Dr. DeBello doesn't see it that way. He says that his model isn't about saying that we don't have free will. It's more about giving us a tool to understand the underlying patterns so we can make better choices.
So it's not about limiting our choices, but actually giving us more options. How does that work?
Well, remember that example with communication and stress. If a couple realizes that they're not talking enough, they can actively work on that. They can schedule date nights, practice listening to each other, make an effort to, say nice things more often.
So they're using this knowledge from the model to actually change their behavior, to steer the relationship in a better direction.
Exactly. They're not just, passively letting things happen. They're taking control.
It's like they're playing the game of love, but now they have a secret strategy guide.
Yeah, I like that. But this leads to another really interesting question. If we can model love with math, does that make it less magical, less special?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. There's something so amazing about the unknown in love, the surprises. Does
Oh.
analyzing it scientifically ruin that?
I think it's a valid question, but I don't think so personally. I mean, think about the human body. Knowing how our organs work, all the complicated stuff happening at a cellular level, it doesn't make us any less incredible, does it?
Right. It's like you can appreciate a beautiful song, even if you know the music theory behind it. It doesn't make it less moving.
Exactly. Actually, sometimes that deeper understanding can make you appreciate something even more. You see the artistry, the intention behind it, and I think that's true for love too.
So it's like we're seeing behind the curtain, but that's not a bad thing. It's helping us understand the incredible complexity of love.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, just maybe, this understanding can even help us deal with the tough times in relationships better. If we know that even small changes can make a big difference, we'll, put more effort into doing the right things.
So it's like Dr. DeBello is giving us this whole new way of thinking about love, one that uses both, like our hearts and our minds.
Yeah, it's not about taking the romance out of it. It's about adding this layer of understanding, of appreciation,
Yeah.
and maybe, just maybe, helping us build stronger relationships.
I love that. It's like taking the best of both worlds, the magic and the science, all rolled into one.
That's a great way to put it. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just feeling really, really inspired by all this. It's amazing what we can learn when we, keep asking questions, even about things as complicated as love.
Me too. Who knows what other secrets are out there waiting to be discovered. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of love and math. Until next time, keep those equations balanced and those hearts open.